Penn State fans, Bob Flounders, Johnny McGonigal. It is Thursday, April 20th, as we record this edition of the Blue White Breakdown. Johnny, you have been one busy guy this spring, but it's only because James Franklin and his recruiters have been very busy as well. And in addition to covering spring football, you've been on high alert for the last couple of weeks, and with good reason, because I don't know. I know that he's had some really successful springs, James and his staff, over the years, but this one has got to be right up there, if not the best. You've been busy. We talked about the blue-white game earlier in the week on the blue-white breakdown, but let's get specific about. Let's do this. Let's kind of get your thoughts on all the things that they've done. You just had a tremendous story that ran on PennLive. We're going to tout that out, and maybe at the end we'll go to maybe what you think are maybe the two or three biggest things that have happened in Penn State recruiting since the Rose Bowl, if you had to kind of rank those. But wherever you want to start with this, these guys are crazy busy stockpiling talent for 2024 and 2025, and it's almost every day there's some kind of, whether it's something's lined up or something might happen or somebody's in there, puts Penn State in their top five. It's been crazy, Johnny. So you get started, and I'll fill in the blanks, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can obviously talk about Quinton Martin, the biggest member in terms of profile in the 2024 class, arguably their top target in the cycle. We'll talk plenty about him in a minute, and I was able to sit down with Quinton, with his head coach at Bell Vernon, just 30 miles south here of Pittsburgh, and, get to know them, get to know what kind of player he is, and so we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's just start, I guess, with the most newsiest piece here, which is Donovan Harbor, a four-star offensive lineman from Wisconsin, committing. We were originally going to record this podcast, I believe, on Wednesday, and I'm like, let's wait maybe a day because there's going to be a little bit more news coming. This was telegraphed a bit, but a big pickup for Penn State's 2024 class. And look, it's not every day that Penn State goes into Wisconsin and gets some places rank him as the best player in the state. Some differing circumstances around that. Just reading, Wisconsin's writer at The Athletic had noted that when Luke Fickell and his staff came in, they didn't re-offer Donovan Harbor, who had previously had an offer from the Badgers. So not sure what's going on there, but Penn State will happily have him in their class. Not only, again, the top player in Wisconsin, but one of the top offensive linemen in the country overall. And it just continues a really good run that Phil Troutwine is on, offensive line coach for Penn State. The 2023 class, bringing in Javen Williams from Wyoming, the 5-star, as well as 3 4-stars, Alex Birchmeyer and Anthony Donka from Virginia, and then Chim Diona right before or right at the February signing day. And then in the 2024 class, you've got now Harbor in tow. Cooper Cousins from McDowell started things off. And over the blue-white weekend, they got that commit from Wyoming's Caleb Brewer. And then in the 2025 class, I've got Jalen Matthews as a 4-star from New Jersey. So really good work being done right now by Phil Troutwine, in the trenches along the offensive line. And again, another really big pickup for this 2024 class, which ranks in the top 10 wherever you look in terms of recruiting outlets.
So Luke Fickell, the new Wisconsin coach, a guy that did really get a great job at Cincinnati, played football at Ohio State, coached at Ohio State. So he knows the Midwest well. He knows the country well. He knows presumably what works at Wisconsin. He I don't want to say he passed on this kid, but he decided not to kind of re-up with the top player in Wisconsin. I thought of it when you were saying that, Johnny. I thought, is it not true? Ohio State wasn't all that wild about Drew Aller. I mean, I know they had some other irons in the fire, but it just brought to mind something like that. Is that accurate or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in recruiting, sometimes it gets weird, whether it's like, a relationship with a new coach. And it doesn't seem like, from what I've read, it doesn't seem like there's any like bad blood between. So Donovan Harbor goes to Catholic Memorial High School in Waukesha. If any Wisconsin natives, if that's wrong, let me know. We're going to need to know, as Donovan Harbor, assuming he's still in signs. And also, Penn State is after one of his teammates, 2024 running back Corey Smith, as well. And, he's a guy who also I don't believe is going to be going to Wisconsin and very well could come to Penn State, even though they already have Quinton Martin in the 2024 class and Keandre Barker in the 2025 class as a four-star running back. So, yeah, they're just, again, I talked about Phil Troutwine doing a really good job. Jaywan Sider has been doing a great job as well, recruiting running backs, specifically Pennsylvania running backs, but they might be able to go into Wisconsin and get a four-star right after getting a four-star in Barker from a Texas high school. So, but, sometimes Bob in recruiting is just weird. Sometimes they're just, situations, whether it's a new coach or whatever. But it doesn't seem like there's any bad blood between the Catholic Memorial coaches and Luke Fickell. So, maybe they just didn't think he was good enough. But again, that seems odd when when Donovan Harbor is the number 7 ranked interior offensive lineman in the country. So again, I think Phil Troutwine and the Nittany Lions would gladly take him. There were a lot of other schools that were in on him as well.
Yeah, and I believe Robert Windsor, who played defensive tackle at Penn State, very good player at Penn State, was a Wisconsin high school star. Played very productive player for Penn State along their defensive line.
Jerry Cross as well from Milwaukee.
Jerry Cross from the Milwaukee area. Mm-hmm. Shout out Milwaukee.
Great city. Have you ever been? How many times have you been to Milwaukee, Bob? You like Milwaukee?
You know what? I was in Milwaukee about 20 years ago. I wanted to see their new park, and so I went a long weekend with some friends just to check it out. Love the area, love the park. So I have not had it's a place I would recommend though. But I guess when you're looking at places to go, like a summer vacation in Milwaukee, you got to be a special kind of person to have that maybe on your top 3 list, especially when Chicago is not that far away. But
right,
I get it, Johnny. So just 2 things about running back, right? So I want to talk about the Quinton Martin story that you just wrote, but just for Penn State fans, I mean, let's just keep it. James Frank, there's a reason why you're seeing a lot of running backs, I think, on Penn State's radar. Penn State is going to be not too far removed from life without, you hate to think about it, life without Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. If these guys continue to develop, and all indications are they sure look good this spring, and, assuming good health, the odds of them staying at Penn State more than 3 years are probably pretty long. So they were able to add Trey Potts in the transfer portal because they needed some depth. But I mean, if you look at the future of the running back position, once you get past the 2024 season, it could be a little murky. So I mean, this is why you're seeing, I think, some really talented runners want to come to Penn State. They see how Penn State kind of turns these guys out, and how they go into successful careers. They see how they're really good at recruiting, not only in state but nationally, to get some running backs. So it's not a coincidence you're seeing some running backs, I think, kind of look Penn State's way. But I wanted you to focus primarily on kind of what you learned in the process of writing your story on PennLive about Quinton Martin.
Yeah. Just first, I guess, on Penn State's running back situation, just to touch on that, like, they've got Nick Singleton and Katron Allen right now as the top 2 backs. Trey Potts coming in from Minnesota, like you mentioned. They have 2023 signees London Montgomery and Cameron Wallace coming into the fold this summer. Montgomery, who's coming off of an ACL tear that forced him to miss his senior season. And then Cameron Wallace, who, is a speedster, but he was a late add in the class, and it kind of felt like it was hey, if we don't get a transfer guy, like we need – and if Montgomery isn't good to go, or if there's a setback, like we need another scholarship running back here to provide, backup cover for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. So, a couple promising tailbacks there in the 2023 class. But to get Quinton Martin, this is the guy that they have been recruiting since he was really a freshman. I mean, he got his first offer November of his freshman year when he was 14 years old from Pitt. And then, into that spring, the spring of his freshman year, offers from Penn State, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, the regional schools. And then his profile just continued to grow in Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. Some of those heavy hitters really came in. But for him, it was always Pitt or Penn State. And this is what I really was interested in when I was talking to him. because he obviously loved Penn State. Jaywan Sider played a key role. Terry Smith, who's an Aliquippa native, the cornerbacks coach and defensive recruiting coordinator for Penn State, so integral in recruiting these Pittsburgh area kids. Did a really good job in this recruitment. And so a lot of love for Penn State staff. And there was Penn State's message, consistency, how they basically made him feel whenever he was on campus, which was a lot, went a really long way. But he was torn between Penn State and Pitt, at least for a time, because Pitt was the first school to offer him, and he visited a bunch. But for Penn State to come up with Quinton, it's a big ad. And talking to his coach, not just from an athletic skill set point of view. You hear high school coaches talk up their players quite a bit, and a lot of times it's like, his short area quickness or spatial awareness and all that kind of stuff. But I never heard a coach talk like off the field, as much and as glowingly as Matt Humbert, the coach of Bell Vernon, talked about Quinton Martin and about how he is a culture guy. He's infectious in the locker room. He really lives and breathes Bell Vernon and that team and that program. And that he's going to be a culture guy when he comes into Penn State. And he's also, so he's not a big ego guy. Like I don't think he's not a guy who is really going to be like, hey, I need 20 touches a game, which works out because you look ahead and you talk about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They're going to be juniors when Quinton Martin signs and enrolls, and he'll enroll early. So he'll be what you would think would be the third, maybe fourth, probably third tailback in that room upon arrival, given his skill set and his pedigree. He's not going to have the kind of me attitude. I need to get carries right away. I'm sure he'll be good enough to get carries right away, but he'll understand his role, and he already knows that he considers Nick Singleton a role model. He texts with him pretty regularly. Nick actually sends him video cut-ups and film, motivational and words of encouragement to Quinton. So they already have a really good relationship. It just feels like 100% out of 100 out of 100 ad for Penn State, both on the field and off the field.
Yeah, and I think during James's time, and I think it's part of the way that James wants his players to kind of grow up as men and as football players. Every once in a while there'll be some flashy guys, but it's in the right way. They're not very demonstrative on the field. I think Omari Evans learned the hard way at the blue-white game after celebrating after that touchdown that, hey, the team comes first. You find the end zone, act like you've been there before. But I mean, they're running backs like Saquon Barkley, the superstar. I mean, I thought he carried himself like a guy that a team first guy, right? Miles Sanders, I thought was a team first guy. Journey Brown, quiet guy, team first guy. So I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence. This is the kind of player that James Franklin and the staff gravitate to. It's not just about the talent. It does matter about locker room chemistry. It does matter about being a good teammate. And if you need a heat check, James Franklin's the kind of guy that'll probably give you one, or J1 will give you one. But and Nick Singleton, I think, is that way, and Katron too. So he seems like he fits the mold, blue chip player who they feel really good about as a locker room presence. I know you probably had a lot of fun writing about him. What about the other guys? Is anything you can share that sticks out to you right now about the most recent commitments? How about the other running back? What have you learned about him?
Just one more note on Quinton Martin, because I forgot to add it in my I went on a little diatribe there. He made me feel really old when he said that he grew up watching Penn State. Like he said, and his next sentence was, "I grew up watching Saquon Barkley."
Ew.
And it's like, that was I guess it was 8 years ago. So for 17-year-old kid, he's 9 years old when he was watching Saquon in 2015, 2016. And I'm like, my God.
Yeah. Whenever anyone mentions the 2005 Penn State team, that's when I'm like, I was just getting into my 40s then. So, but I mean, I mean, time moves on, right? But it's funny. It's funny what age is right now to certain people. But man, I'm excited to see this guy. Penn State's got a pretty rich tradition, not just have running backs from Western PA, but just great players from the greater Pittsburgh area. And Quinton didn't grow up watching the Sean Lees and Paul Posluszny's because that was probably a little too far back. But I mean, there is some there. I'm sure that there are some players that played at Penn State not too far down the timeline that I think that either the parents remember or the older brothers remember or the players remember. And Penn State really has got a great tie, I think, to Western Pennsylvania.
And really, PA in general, when it comes to the running backs, like they've now, like they hit the jackpot with Saquon Barkley. I mean, a kid who was looking like he was going to go to Rutgers and then, ends up at Penn State. And the way that all kind of turned out, it feels like at this point, with the trajectory Penn State is on as a program, that they should never miss out on the top running back in the state. The way that they've been able to cultivate that pipeline, Saquon, Miles Sanders, Journey Brown, Nick Singleton, London Montgomery. I think I might be missing one. There have been so many at this point. And now Quinton Martin. It's been really impressive to see that sustained over a stretch where you've had two running backs coaches in that time, Charles Huff and then now Jaywan Sider. And so a lot of that comes from Franklin and the whole best in PA stays in PA messaging that Quinton admitted was hammered home, quite a bit from the staff. But it's a formula that has worked for Penn State. And again, just the constant communication. They stressed him and his uncle, Quinton and his uncle stressed that the communication end of things was really the big thing, is that they were relaxed about it, but they're like, hey, if you got nothing else going on this weekend, come up for a visit. And there were so many situations where that happened, and you just kind of grow a greater attachment to State College, to Happy Valley. And and look, now going forward, like I mentioned, Corey Smith, the Wisconsin running back in the 2024 class, he's projected to land with Penn State. So if they're able to get him in the 24 class, that'd be huge to have him and Quinton Martin. And they already have, 2025 running back in Keandre Barker, who, so he's from Texas, he goes to high school in Texas, but he's from Arkansas. And, again, 4-star guy, depending on where you look. I know that he's ranked, I believe, the number 69th overall prospect in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. It's a little early with the 25 class, like when it comes to overall rankings and that kind of stuff. So you want to take it with a pinch of salt, but at the same time, for him to be already considered ranked that highly, it's only good vibes at this point for Jaywan Sider. And soon enough, they'll be looking to add a 2026 running back. That's how quickly recruiting goes at this point, Bob. So a really good few weeks. For Sider, for Troutwine, as previously mentioned, for Franklin and the program, kind of on the whole, because they've got 3 guys in now in the 25 class, and I expect that to grow over the next few weeks. But the 24 class is really looking strong right now.
Johnny, it's going to be so exciting for you in a couple of years to hear like a Penn State running back recruit talk to you about growing up as a young kid watching Nick Singleton play. It's going to be music to your ears when you hear that. But
it's going to be like a Looney Tunes cartoon where like the head just like explodes or like just drop an ankle on my head at that point. Like, yeah, it's going to be something.
Okay,
I mean, the fact that Quinton already called Nick Singleton a role model. I get it. He's 19 years old, but at the same time, again, someone with his national profile and everything, I get it. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow when it's like, I grew up watching Quinton Martin.
Yeah, I know. For you, it's going to be for me, I don't even know. Like, I don't want to even go that far down my future timeline. But Johnny, so if you factor in recruiting and you factor in all of the things that kind of have happened at Penn State, excuse me, since the Rose Bowl, right? We're only talking about, what is it, 3.5 months, like 100 plus days or something like that. We're still in the middle of April. It just feels to me like, I don't know. And I would, if it wasn't true, I would be going the other way. But it just feels to me like the last 100 or so days or whatever it was since the Rose Bowl, really have not. I don't think they could have gone much better for Penn State's program in football program in just about any way you wanna look at it. And I'll start with something I thought that was a little bit pivotal, but it probably does not stand out to most Penn State fans, and maybe it's not on your radar. But the way that James pivoted early in January, and made a change at the wide receiver position. I bring it up only because I think James is the expectations at Penn State now after the Rose Bowl and after the way they've recruited. If he senses things aren't going the way that he wants them to, and he senses, how close maybe this team is to really becoming truly that elite. He's mentioned elite before, and it's kind of bit him a little bit, but they've closed the gap, right? And the change he made at wideouts coach and pivoting and being able to get, our plan to get Dante Cephas, the Kent State receiver, onto campus. But it just seems like, even when it looked like, hey, this could be a dire situation, he makes a change. Some wideouts were able to step up late in spring. They're excited about Dante, but everything I think that James, needed to do, he's done. And I just wonder, when you look at Penn State's offseason, whether it's the January enrollees, whether it's the Drew Aller's development, whether it's, guys staying healthy, whether it's, Manny Diaz back in his second year as DC, whether it's the recruiting success in 2024 and now 2025, what are 2 or 3 things that stand out to you maybe about just how, I think, interesting and unique the last 3.5 months have been for Penn State?
Yeah, going off the wide receiver situation with Marcus Higgins and pivoting from Taylor Stubblefield, it has been a lot of really good vibes, really good, kind of news essentially over the last couple months. But I really think that kind of started with some negative stuff, because after the season they missed out on key wide receiver transfers that they wanted. Caden Prather going to Maryland, Dante Thornton, who was once verbally committed as a high school prospect to Penn State, going from Oregon to Tennessee. We know that kind of helped prompt the Taylor Stubblefield dismissal and moving on to Marcus Higgins. But yeah, I do like that it's seemingly coming out of spring. You've got some separation at receiver with Keandre Langford-Smith and Harrison Wallace stepping up and taking on more of an on-field and off-field leadership role. And Dante Cephas was a big add for them as well. I think another big thing was, and this was known a little bit before the Stubblefield news, I believe, but the fact that Olu Fashanu decided to come back. And I think that was even decided on his end, like really during the season or at the, after that Ohio State game that he got injured in. But to hear that news and have that confirmation that, for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen in the backfield, for Drew Aller at quarterback, that you've got a guy like that protecting your blind side, protecting and opening up holes on the left side of the line. It's huge. And then into spring, I just look at the development of the young talent, because we know that there were guys who were either limited or out in spring ball. It is spring ball after all, but it's opportunity for these young guys. And to come away without any major injuries, because James said that all the guys who were either out in the spring game or during camp will be ready for the fall, which is great news. So they came out unscathed in that end. And to see young players like Tony Rojas and KJ Winston and Deni Dennis Sutton continue to develop. And there's just a lot of pieces that for a team that lost so many players, and will have, 6-7 guys drafted here next weekend, for them to feel as good as they feel, top to bottom on the roster, is a testament to the coaching staff and a testament to where the program is right now, that they can retain certain players, that certain players who maybe at other programs would have looked elsewhere if they were backups, decided to stay and stick it out, and they're being able to work in and develop depth last year. I don't know. That's kind of a convoluted answer, because you asked for like 2 or 3 things, and I gave you like I gave you a bunch of stuff. Okay. But I just think like it's really from the spot where it's okay. They miss out on these transfer wide receivers, the way that James pivoted and the way that the program has kind of just, been on a roll ever since. There hasn't been too much negative pop up on the field, at least. And so yeah, I think kind of all full going into the summer now, where they'll have summer workouts, and then soon enough we got
Yeah.
training camp.
Yeah, Johnny, and I think as we get close to wrapping this up, it's kind of interesting how it kind of matches up. We mentioned the wide receiver room, Marcus Higgins, Taylor Stubblefield, that being, hey, third receiver, but really third receiver, fourth receiver. It can't just be three. A couple guys step up, but the other position, defensive tackle, right? They have a new position coach too, Deion Barnes. So the storylines that are going to extend past spring into August, pending maybe some new additions via the portal, it's kind of interesting that a couple of maybe potentially problematic areas, maybe not, but you also have some new voices and some new faces that are kind of in charge of developing those positions. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch, because it's going to be a great challenge for the new coaches, for Marcus and Deion. But I mean, if you see some growth from the defensive tackle room, and you see some growth from the wideouts we really don't know about yet, that bodes even. That really reflects well, I think, on James for being able to find these guys and turning potential, question marks into, solid pieces or even strengths. Because last year at this time, I would have not bet a lot of money on the offensive line stepping up. I would have been really worried about linebacker. And you see how things played out. So it's just going to be fun to follow that, Johnny. Is there any other thing on the recruiting trail Penn State fans should kind of be on the lookout for, if not, in the next week or so, but maybe in the off season, whether it's May or June? Is there anything you're going to be watching? What do you think is next for Penn State recruiting?
Yeah, I just think it more in like the short term, in these next couple weeks, the portal is still open. And I think that's something you got to focus on now. I'm sure the staff is focused on it before we get into May and June even. The fact that the portal is open till the end of the month and they want to add a defensive tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to add an offensive lineman. And I mentioned on the last podcast, they already offered the kid from Wyoming, who is getting offers from every Power 5 program in the country, it seems. So they're going to be active in the portal, and that's just something to keep an eye on really over the next week and a half or so before it closes, because it was this time last year that Penn State got a commitment from Chop Robinson. It was a little different timeline because then he ended up signing later. But yeah, it was, and he turned out to be one of the 5-6 best players on the roster, one of the best pass rushers in the Big Ten, and if you look at advanced stats in the country, and so if they're able to add an impact guy like that, at whatever position, preferably for them, defensive tackle. I don't know if that kind of talent is out there. Aside from the kid leaving Georgia, it looks like he's probably going to go to USC. Yeah. But even if it's a rotational piece at D tackle or elsewhere, if they're able to add more depth to this team, it can only help, because I think they're in a good spot right now. They can always be in a better spot. They can always add another piece or two, and try to make this push for what they want. They've talked about it. The players have talked about it. Big Ten title, compete for a national championship, all that kind of good stuff. So, the portal is something to watch here over the next couple of weeks for sure.
All right, Penn State fans, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Blue White Breakdown. And remember, just because Penn State spring practice is over and, there might be a little bit of a lull in terms of recruiting, next week, it's all about NFL draft season for Penn State. There's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot to get to. They've got some really talented players that are going to get picked in the draft. The draft will start it's actually a week from today, April 27th. I think that's right. 27th through the 29th, including Joey Porter. We'll have to find out where Jair Brown, Brenton Strange, Parker Washington and his health, Juice Scruggs, Sean Clifford. We'll find out where these guys are going to spend, next year in NFL City. So it'll be exciting to watch. And I think, with the way that they're recruiting, Johnny, you're going to see these draft classes at Penn State continually get bigger and larger, and you're going to see kids start to get picked earlier in drafts. And it really starts with James Franklin was kind of his mission when he got here was to become an even better recruiter, and he's doing it. And I think you're going to see it in future NFL drafts. So that's it for the blue-white breakdown. Johnny, get some rest, and we will be back hopefully next week to talk about some NFL draft stuff. I'm sure everyone wants to know where Joey Porter's going to go, but we'll be back next week.